Lizzie. Today I'm going to talk about Catholic theology that just clicked with me when I was converting into Catholicism. So I've talked so much on my channel about how many heresies I believed as a Protestant. I personally just believed a lot of heresies. Not only did I think Catholicism was wrong, I just didn't like the vibe of Catholicism. I don't know why, my intuitions are just so towards the heretic groups. That's what I was cheering on. I believe the most outrageous things. I was a Christian physicalist, so I didn't believe that there were souls. I also thought hell didn't exist. I also believed that Jesus isn't God. And I thought that Jesus died on the cross to show us what it means to die to self, rather than actually needing to forgive sins. Right when I was converting into Catholicism in 2018, I made an entire video called 10 Heresies I Believed as a Protestant: Gnosticism, Sabellianism, Arianism. So converting meant changing my theology on so many things because I just wanted a truth. And we can't even agree on what is true. But I thought it'd be fun to make a video of the things that actually felt intuitive. So the things that I was randomly correct about. That clicked when I was converting. Number one, staying after Mass ends to pray and reflect. When I was a Protestant, after church was over, everyone would stand up and start talking to each other. And for me, I always wanted extra time to just meditate and think about the sermon and the songs. It honestly felt jarring for me sometimes. And I remember that in college, sometimes after church, before going and getting brunch with everyone, I would go off on my own to just think and pray for 5 or 10 minutes. I was absolutely shocked when after Mass, instead of going out and talking to everyone, people just stayed in silence and prayed. I was so excited, this is my spiritual vibe, and I thought it was just Latin Mass for a while, but actually so many Masses people stay after to think and pray, and that just vibes with me really well. Number two is the Trinity being a mystery. I remember always feeling what is wrong with me growing up as a Protestant Christian. There would be all these ways that the Trinity was explained to us. What I'm about to say, by the way, is heretical, but in my church youth group in high school, they said that the Trinity is ice, water, and steam. And there were other examples too, and I was always so confused and didn't fully get it. And people were like, what's wrong with you? Why did it not make sense to me? And so I remember the first day of the first Catholic Bible study I ever went to, we were talking about the Trinity, and I was like, oh, I just never understood it. And they're like, yeah, obviously no one understands it. It's a mystery. And of course there's explanations in Catholic theology, but ultimately Catholicism allows us to admit that we'll never fully understand it. And that was such a freeing moment when I learned that for the first time. Number three, adoration. And I don't mean an adoration service. I just mean walking into a Catholic church in the middle of the day and just praying in front of the Eucharist, reading theology in front of the Eucharist, reflecting on your life in front of the Eucharist, whatever you want to do in that time of adoration. When I was Protestant in college, sometimes I would get my dinner to go from our cafeteria and then go outside in a secluded place and hang out with God, and then I would just sit in silence and spend time with God. It was so amazing when I learned about the concept of adoration, because I was like, oh my goodness, I had the same intuition before I knew what the Eucharist was and before I heard about adoration. I already craved that. Number four, praying for the dead. I remember when my grandma died when I was 14 years old, feeling so sad because she was not religious, and so I thought she's going to hell. And I remember at the time asking God to extinguish her soul rather than send her to torment in hell. And at the time, that wasn't really allowed. The concept of praying for someone who had already died wasn't a thing in the church that I was part of. But something within me wanted to hold on to a hope that there was a way to pray for the souls of people who had died. And so when I learned that that was an option in Catholicism, it was so incredible. And I think it makes it easier to mourn people who have died. Number five, that getting drunk is a sin. So I remember in college, I had friends who were Protestant Christians who were like, it's fine to get drunk sometimes, not a big deal. And while there are some Bible verses on the topic, there were a lot of Christians who I knew who thought that getting drunk sometimes was fine, as long as you weren't doing any really reckless behavior. But for some reason, I just really stood strong and I was like, no, I'm never getting drunk. And once I became Catholic and learned actually the Catholic position is also you're not supposed to get drunk, I was like, wow, I was right on something randomly. I made an entire video on the Catholic view of drinking alcohol, and I will link that up here and below if you want to learn the full theology of it. Number 6, the potential of non-Christians being in heaven. This may be one of my favorite things in Catholic theology because it really shows the mercy of God. So I think a lot of people can relate to this who have been Protestant or currently are. A lot of Protestant Christians believe that only Christians will be in heaven. And so people of other religions, people who've never heard the gospel, too bad, they're going to hell. And this always came across as very harsh to me. And I remember I disagreed with my church growing up and people at my church who thought like this because I just couldn't understand how God's mercy would send so many people to hell. The Catholic view on it is actually that we don't know. It's a mystery who's going to heaven and hell. Yes, canonized saints, we have certainty they're in heaven, but everyone else, how could we possibly know? But the Catholic Church allows for the possibility that atheists, non-Christians, Protestants may be in heaven, and it leaves it open rather than saying, yep, all these people are going to hell. And that concept of having humility and saying, how could we possibly know? And also saying that it is possible to have hope that many people will be in heaven. That is such a beautiful theology. And I have an entire YouTube video on this topic that goes super in depth. So if you want to know the church's view on it and how church history has talked about it, then go watch that video. Number 7, craving to receive communion. I honestly think this was just God working in me when I was in the midst of thinking about converting into Catholicism. But I remember that I stopped going to church after my depression episode ended, and I was kind of church hopping, going to different denominations. I remember that the churches I was going to did not have communion every week. And so there was like a period of time of like many months where I didn't receive any Protestant communion or Catholic or Orthodox communion, just nothing. And so I remember around the time when I started attending Orthodox every week, I was craving it. It was before I started attending Orthodox. I started looking into could Catholicism or Orthodox be true. Before that even started, I was already craving communion, like I missed Protestant communion. And of course, the Protestant communion I was used to was just symbolic. It was to reflect on Jesus' death. But I think it's amazing that before I even knew what the Eucharist was, God was already preparing my heart to accept the theology. Number 8, God's active versus permissive will. A lot of Protestants already accept and know this, but for whatever reason, I didn't. And it just explains so many things. As a Protestant, I really struggled with the problem of evil, and it was a big reason why I wanted to leave Christianity completely. And this really basic concept, it just explains so many things and makes sense to me. Number 9, not every sin is equal. I have no idea how many Protestant Christians think this. I don't know if this is like an evangelical thing or a Church of Christ thing, who knows. But I was taught growing up that all sins are the same. They're all like equal to each other. And I always thought that was really weird. It just didn't make sense that rape versus a white lie could be equal to each other, right? It doesn't make sense. And it was taught in a way that we're all sinful in the same way. And I don't think you have to say sin is equal to get to the idea that we all need God's mercy and God's forgiveness, right? You don't have to say all sins are equally the same, because they're not. Some sins cause way more harm than others. So the Catholic Church's view on it is there are so many different kinds of sins. We have the 7 deadly sins, and there's even a ranking of which ones are the worst. Then we have venial sins and mortal sins. And then grave matter can become a mortal sin, but you can do the exact same action, and depending on your mindset or whether or not you knew it was a sin, it can be the same action, but the level of sin is different. And so that just makes so much sense to me, that all sin is not equal. That idea always made me uncomfortable. It was just difficult for me to accept it. And so the Catholic view of sin has so much more depth to it, and I really like it. And number 10, I've talked about this in so many YouTube videos when sharing my depression story. When I was in depression, it felt like God had abandoned me. How getting my bipolar diagnosis and living with depression for a year really pushed me to become Catholic. That really helps have a healthy suffering theology. And so a lot of people will see something horrible happen in their life or experience a really bad mental illness and be like, where is God? Why is God not with me? But the Catholic and Orthodox churches have feast days for saints who have been martyred. That's just a huge deal. Being connected to the tradition, you understand that so many people have been martyred for God. And after I read this book, I realized I'm never gonna question God's existence again because of the problem of evil. Because I was wanting to leave Christianity, and I felt like there wasn't a way to understand the suffering I experienced in bipolar disorder in the Christian community I was part of. And of course, lots of Protestant churches have beautiful theologies around suffering, but the Catholic one in particular has been really healing for me, and I will link below some videos and up here that talk about my depression story and the Catholic theology of suffering. And after my conversion, the pain of my mental illness when it comes to how it was affecting my relationship with God, it didn't hurt as much once I understood the Catholic view of suffering. That is the whole video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have been uploading long form videos to my YouTube channel once a week and shorts every day. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!